Hi and welcome back to my shed. In this video I show you what I went through to make some special washers. These washers are no longer available and I've been asked to have a go at making some. A drawing for the part was sent to me and surprisingly it was in metric. I know most engineering establishments today work in metric, but what seems like 1,000 years ago BSA built things using imperial measurements. The most likely sizes for things like washers when this was made is 3/8, 3/16, 7/8 and the associated decimal sizes like 0.375. The drawing I received was very well presented. Even so, having an actual wheel hub for comparison meant I had to make a couple of alterations to some of the sizes. The sizes supplied with the drawing, although close, would never have fit my sample. So on the principle that a bird in the hand is worth any drawing with an error on it, I made them to fit my sample. I used 20mm bright drawn mild steel bar. After facing off and centre drilling it, I drilled it out to 7mm diameter. The finished size is going to be 9.52mm, about 3/8 of an inch. This is a little bit bigger than the drawing size. Having a couple of sample components to use as checking pieces, I worked to them. This particular technique for gauging the washer length was a bit over the top, as a rule would have done the same job, especially as I'd got more to do than just the one. Have I ever mentioned I don't really like doing batch work? In order to complete the remaining features to these special washers, I need to make a fixture to hold them. For this, I'm going to use scraps that I've used on previous projects. This first bit is the top clamp, and it'll be held in place with 3 5mm screws. The recess will be a loose fit over the washers. Although not shown here, all the washers were put onto a centering mandrel and then machined down to 19mm OD. To hold these washers, the base has to be a good true fit. Starting with the OD and using cigarette papers enables me to get everything where I need it. Cleaning up the bore gives me something to set to later before machining the washer recess. This is the fixture assembler as it will be used for cutting the bore to 9.52mm ID, but leaving a 1 to 1.2mm high location lug or tang. This is where the madness of my thinking gets tested, I suppose. I use 4 clamps to hold everything in place while the bore's being machined. I've just got time for one of my usual and daily rituals. I haven't got a 3/8 inch slotted broach, and as you can plainly see I'm having to think out of the proverbial box. I'm going to use the slotter to make my 7mm bores into 3/8 inch bores, leaving a 2mm wide tang in there. My indexing table was used as a rotational reference on the shaper, so the fixture had to be set true to it before the indexing table is bolted to the shaper table. This bit will make you sit up in your chair. I've put two 5mm square high-speed steel cutter blanks in my collet chuck side by side. The idea is, using my homemade grinding fixture, I can grind a 4.75mm radius to just one of the cutter blanks. Both blanks marked up to just over 10mm, so with a bit of maths I knew just how much to take off one side to get my radius. Now it's time to make the clearance angles to the rest of my cutter profile. I did have a go at making my own push broach tools for this project, but it was too much for the poor things. With 64 steps, shaving just over 1.5 hours at a time, well, let's just say I'm glad I was wearing my safety glasses. Having mounted the indexing assembly onto the shaper table and removing the clapper box in favour of a fixed tool holder, obviously of dubious quality, I set about cutting the bore of each washer from 7mm to 9.52mm by using a slotting technique. Having reached the bottom of the slot, I raised the cutter back to the resetting position, then rotated the index table by 50 degrees and resecured it for the next plunge. Obviously, I could only rotate the index table so far, or I would end up chopping the tang off, and that just won't do. I did have a couple of spare washers in case, it did go wrong, and for the record I used both of them. A friend of mine has a couple of these rear wheel units, and he dropped them off at my door that I may be able to make measurements and do trial fits as required. At this stage of the process, these washers are too long, so it was time now to use the mill. Before I put the washers on the mill, I cleaned up one side on the surface grinder first. I also used the same fixture base plate on the mill to aid not only some sort of holding system, but to aid repeatability. The first milling task was to finish the washers to overall length by milling each half at a time. Then by using two very carefully positioned clamps over some scrap plates, I could mill the central slot to depth and width, leaving two very small 2mm wide keys on either side. After a bit of hand fettling, these very small washers were ready to be posted. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.